Thank you so much for talking to us. This is a slightly peculiar, unusual way of doing an interview.
Behind the gilded walls of Buckingham Palace, a document has surfaced that could reshape the royal family forever. King Charles has reportedly uncovered a hidden clause in his late mother's will, one that directly concerns Prince Harry's inheritance, and the discovery has stunned the monarchy to its core. The morning of November 23rd, 2025, began like any other in the private offices of Buckingham Palace, with Charles seated at the same mahogany desk where his mother once conducted her most sensitive affairs, surrounded by leather-bound volumes and the weight of centuries of royal tradition. Over the next hour, however, the room became the stage for a revelation that would send shockwaves through the House of Windsor. Charles had requested a comprehensive review of his mother's estate documents. More than 3 years had passed since Queen Elizabeth's passing in September 2022, and certain legal formalities required periodic attention. His Majesty's senior legal counsel, accompanied by the Keeper of the Privy Purse and 2 trusted advisors, assembled what they assumed would be a routine briefing. Dressed in his customary dark suit, reading glasses perched on his nose, the king prepared for what he expected to be tedious but necessary administrative work. As the leather portfolio was opened, page after page confirmed the distribution of assets, properties, and heirlooms exactly as Charles had understood them, with the main provisions executed according to protocol. Yet hidden among the familiar pages lay a clause no one had anticipated, one with the potential to rewrite the family's financial and emotional landscape. Balmoral, Sandringham, the private jewelry collection, everything had been allocated and transferred as expected. Charles had seen these documents before, or so he thought, but now his weathered yet steady hands broke the seal on a new folder. Inside lay a paper in his mother's own hand, her distinctive script immediately recognizable, though not the flowing penmanship of her younger years. This was the writing of her final months, slightly shakier, but deliberate. Dated March 15th, 2022, just 6 months before her death, the words caught his breath as he began to read. The room fell into silence. His advisors watched as his expression shifted from curiosity to surprise, then to something more complex, a mixture of emotions that, in public, he had long learned to conceal. But this was not a public moment. This was a son reading his mother's final thoughts about his other son, the one who had left, whose absence had left a wound in the family that refused to heal. The document contained a meticulously detailed, legally binding clause addressing Prince Harry's inheritance in ways that contradicted everything Charles had understood about his mother's wishes, or perhaps revealed wishes she had deliberately kept hidden until now. Even in death, the Queen seemed to be playing the long game, thinking moves ahead, protecting her family in ways they might not understand until the right moment. Charles read the passage 3 times. His legal counsel confirmed the document was authentic, properly witnessed, and legally enforceable. There was no question of validity. The only questions now were how to proceed. The clause did not simply grant Harry money or property. It imposed conditions, stipulations, and a framework that would demand decisions, conversations, and perhaps a complete reassessment of the current relationship between king and son. One advisor cleared his throat, breaking the silence. Should His Majesty take time to consider this privately, or begin preparing briefing documents for the relevant parties? The questions lingered, but Charles remained focused on his mother's words, written in secrecy as her time dwindled. He set the document down, removed his glasses, and pinched the bridge of his nose in profound weariness, thinking of her composing these instructions in Windsor, sealed and hidden until the right moment. Had she imagined this scene, her eldest son, now king, discovering her hidden wishes and deciding whether to honor them? Of course she had. Elizabeth had always thought everything through. The weight of the crown felt heavier than ever. Charles had inherited his mother's throne, her responsibilities, her burdens, but not, he realized, with the certainty of having inherited her family's unresolved crises. Wrapped in legal provisions designed to guide his actions, the document before Charles presented not just an inheritance, but a test. Would he honor his mother's clearly stated wishes, even if they complicated his own plans and preferences? Or would he, as kings sometimes must, interpret duty in a way that served the present rather than the past? His advisors waited in silence, the clock on the mantelpiece ticking steadily, while outside, London carried on, unaware that within these walls, a discovery had been made that could alter the course of the House of Windsor. Whatever Charles decided now, there would be no turning back. His mother's hidden clause was no longer secret, and the family would all have to confront its implications. The document specified an inheritance for Prince Harry that was both substantial and conditional, revealing a complexity to her final wishes that no one had fully anticipated. Approximately £20 million from her private estate was set aside for him, but it was far from an unconditional gift. The first condition was explicit. Harry would receive full access to his inheritance only upon maintaining a meaningful connection to the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. The Queen required that he spend no fewer than 90 days per year on British soil or in Commonwealth nations, engaged in work supporting charitable causes or initiatives that benefited communities across the realm. This was not a demand that he resume official royal duties. Elizabeth had been too pragmatic for that, but it was a firm requirement that he remain meaningfully connected to the world she had devoted 7 decades to serving. The second provision addressed Harry's children, Archie and Lilibet. Roughly £5 million of the inheritance was earmarked specifically for their education and upbringing, but with strict stipulations. The funds were to be managed by trustees approved by both Harry and the reigning monarch, ensuring Charles would retain oversight and a measure of influence over how the resources were used. The clause also specified that Harry's children, Archie and Lilibet, should spend meaningful time in the United Kingdom as they grew older, with the explicit purpose of maintaining their connection to their heritage and their family. The Queen had written that her great-grandchildren should never become strangers to the land of their ancestors. Perhaps most striking was a personal letter attached to the legal document, addressed to Charles and intended to be read only when the clause was discovered. In it, Elizabeth acknowledged the difficulty of the situation with Harry, recognizing the anger, hurt, and sense of betrayal felt by many in the family. Yet she also wrote words that cut to the heart of a mother's and grandmother's perspective. Harry was still her grandson, his children were still her great-grandchildren, and she could not leave this earth without making one final effort to ensure they would not be completely lost to the family. The letter contained a request, phrased not as a command, but as the hope of a dying mother. That bridges once burned could sometimes be rebuilt, but only if both sides were willing to supply the materials. Her inheritance clause, she explained, was her way of supplying those materials, providing the financial and emotional resources for her son and grandson to try. The legal team confirmed the clause was ironclad. Every word had been carefully drafted with the advice of her most trusted legal minds to withstand scrutiny and make her intentions unmistakably clear. This was not a suggestion to be dismissed or reinterpreted. It was the will of a queen, and more than that, the will of a mother and grandmother who had run out of time to act herself, but refused to give up trying, even in death. The sum involved, around £20 million, was significant, yet carefully measured. Elizabeth had ensured it was large enough to provide real security and opportunity, but not so large as to fuel accusations of special treatment or overshadow the deeper purpose of her provision. Reading through the document, Charles could almost hear his mother's voice, practical yet emotional, firm yet hopeful. She had known she was dying, and she had known that the Harry situation required more than money. It required thought, care, and a chance for reconciliation that only time and willingness could make possible. What would become Charles's problem to solve? The Queen had left him this a tool, perhaps, or a burden, or maybe both. A hidden clause in her will that was, at its heart, a final plea to keep her family whole, even as she prepared to leave it behind. To understand why Queen Elizabeth included this provision requires looking back at her evolving relationship with Prince Harry, particularly during the tumultuous years following his departure from royal duties. The Queen had always held a special affection for Harry, something observed by those close to the family. Since he was a child, he made her laugh, and his irreverence reminded some of her own youth, before duty had transformed spontaneity into protocol. The decision by Harry and Meghan to step back from royal life in January 2020 had blindsided her. Sources at the time described her as hurt and disappointed, not because Harry sought a different life, but because the announcement had been made without proper consultation, forcing the institution into a reactive position. Yet even in that hurt, friends of the Queen said her primary concern remained Harry's well-being and future security. The Oprah interview in March 2021 had been even more difficult. Allegations of racism within the family, claims of insufficient support for Meghan's mental health, and suggestions that the institution had been cold and uncaring, all of it wounded Elizabeth personally, as she embodied the monarchy in many ways. Publicly, her responses were measured, including the now famous phrase that recollections may vary, a diplomatic acknowledgement that multiple perspectives existed. Privately, however, she was deeply troubled by the fractures in her family. What many did not know was that she maintained private channels of communication with Harry during this period. They spoke by phone, not frequently, but enough to keep the connection alive. She made it clear, in ways only a grandmother could, that she loved him despite his choices, did not agree with all his decisions, and disapproved of the public nature of the family disputes, but the bond between them remained intact, beyond the reach of palace politics. In her final year, as her health visibly declined, those around her saw a woman quietly coming to terms with her mortality, methodically arranging her affairs while ensuring that, even in death, her love and guidance could still influence the family she cherished. As she organized her affairs, making peace with what she would leave undone. The Harry situation sat high on Queen Elizabeth's list of unfinished business. She had successfully navigated so much during her 70-year reign, modernizing the monarchy in crucial ways, while preserving its essential character, holding the Commonwealth together through decades of change, but she could not mend the rift in her own family, and that failure haunted her. The drafting of the hidden clause appears to have occurred in late 2021 and early 2022, when several factors converged. Her health was declining, Harry and Meghan were settled in California, and unlikely to resume any royal duties, and the Jubilee celebrations loomed with uncertainty over whether Harry would attend. In this context, Elizabeth decided she needed to act not through public gestures or family meetings, which had failed, but through the one tool she still fully controlled: her will. Consulting her most trusted legal advisor, who understood both the legal intricacies and the family dynamics, she crafted language that would achieve her goals. To provide Harry with financial security, ensure that his children would remain connected to their British heritage, and crucially, create a framework that would require Charles and Harry to communicate, negotiate, and collaborate to implement the terms. The decision to keep the clause hidden until after a comprehensive estate review was deliberate. She did not want it to become part of the immediate post-death narrative or be used by the press during the early days of Charles's reign, when he was establishing authority. In her personal letter attached to the clause, Elizabeth acknowledged the depth of her concern. She had perhaps waited too long to intervene forcefully, had trusted too much that family members would reconcile on their own, and now recognized that her health and the protocols surrounding her position made certain interventions impossible. What emerges from this is a portrait of a woman who loved deeply, felt the fracturing of her family as a personal failure, and refused to accept that failure as permanent. She had weathered countless storms in her long life and fundamentally believed that family bonds, when truly tested, could withstand even the most serious disagreements. Her hidden clause was an expression of that belief, a final attempt to ensure that the test of her family would not result in permanent separation. And now, sitting in his private office with the document still in hand, King Charles faced a dilemma that was both profoundly personal and deeply constitutional. The stakes were obvious. This was his mother's dying wish regarding his son, the child he had loved, worried about, and yes, often been angered and disappointed by. Yet the constitutional dimension was equally significant. As king, Charles's decisions carried weight far beyond family dynamics, and whatever he chose to do with this information would send clear signals about his reign, his priorities, and his vision for the monarchy's future. His relationship with Harry had deteriorated sharply since the move to California. Public accusations, the Netflix documentary, and Harry's memoir, which criticized Charles harshly as both father and future king, had wounded him deeply. Though Charles had spent his life developing a thick skin for public criticism, censure from one's own son broadcast to the world cut through even the most impervious armor. The anger he felt coexisted with the love he still held for Harry, creating a constant internal tension. William's reaction also mattered greatly. The Prince of Wales had been even less forgiving than his father regarding Harry's departure and public statements. The bond between the brothers, once close, had fractured perhaps irreparably. William saw Harry's actions as betrayals, not only of the family, but of the monarchy itself, and he had consistently advised Charles to take a firm line. The discovery of the Queen's hidden provision threatened to complicate William's position and potentially create friction between father and heir. Charles arranged a private meeting with William the following day, knowing it would be difficult. He needed to inform his eldest son of the clause before making any decisions. William had a right to know, and pragmatically, Charles needed his support, or at least his understanding, to avoid public discord that could weaken the monarchy and fuel the press. When William arrived in Charles's private sitting room, he sensed the seriousness of the situation. Charles explained what had been discovered, and William's expression darkened as he listened without interrupting, jaw tightening. When Charles finished, William's response was immediate and sharp. Grandmother had overstepped. She had no right to impose conditions that required reconciliation with someone who had repeatedly criticized the family. The money was one matter, but insisting that Harry spend time in the UK and granting oversight of his children's upbringing crossed a line, a move William saw as manipulation dressed in familial concern. Beyond the grave, Charles allowed his son to vent, understanding and even sharing some of the anger. Yet he also grasped his mother's motivations and felt the weight of obligation that came with being her son and successor. Elizabeth had asked him, as directly as a queen and a mother could, to give Harry another chance to use her final gift as an opportunity for healing. Could he simply refuse? Should he? The question was far more complex than William seemed to think. The conversation with his eldest son lasted over an hour, reaching no consensus. William made his position clear. If Charles honored the provision fully, reaching out to Harry and offering the inheritance with all its conditions, William would neither obstruct nor participate, and while he would remain civil, he would not pretend to welcome Harry's return to spending significant time in the UK. The wounds were too deep, the trust too broken. William would remain the protective older brother, mindful of the pain Harry had caused Catherine and their children. Beyond family dynamics, Charles had to weigh broader implications for the monarchy. Public opinion on Harry was divided. Some saw him as a victim of an outdated institution, prioritizing love and mental health over duty. Others saw him as spoiled, ungrateful, exploiting his royal connection for gain, while publicly criticizing the family. News of a substantial inheritance with conditions designed to lure Harry back could be perceived as compassionate or as a sign of weakness. Charles's advisors were similarly split. The older generation, loyal to his mother's memory, urged honoring her wishes fully, citing duty, family unity, and respect for the dead, while younger advisors, concerned with optics and precedent, cautioned against appearing to reward bad behavior or allowing Harry to control the monarchy even in death. Late that night, Charles sat alone, reflecting on his mother, her guidance, her love, and her dedication to the crown. This clause was her final piece of advice, delivered from beyond death, challenging him to decide what kind of king and what kind of father he wanted to be, and whether those identities could coexist. Walking the path she had laid would demand courage, forgiveness, and the willingness to risk further pain if Harry rejected the olive branch or failed to live up to its conditions. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away in Montecito, Harry had no idea that his grandmother's will contained a provision just for him, nor that his father had discovered it and was wrestling with its implications. His life in California had settled into a rhythm that, while drastically different from royal life, shared similar demands and pressures. Netflix projects, memoir deals, speaking engagements, all requiring public performance under new protocols and masters. Financially secure but not overwhelmingly wealthy, Harry still needed to work to sustain his lifestyle and charitable initiatives. His relationship with his father remained strained. They spoke occasionally, but the distance, emotional and physical, had only grown, leaving Charles to navigate the delicate intersection of family duty, royal precedent, and the final wishes of a mother who had tried one last time to mend what had fractured. Brief conversations between Charles and Harry had usually revolved around logistics concerning the children or unavoidable family events. Charles had attended his coronation, but the visit had been brief and interactions minimal. Harry had offered condolences and support during his father's cancer diagnosis in early 2024, but his response had been polite rather than warm. The wall between them remained high, growing with each passing month of silence and distance. Yet the conditions attached to the inheritance would immediately create friction. Spending 90 days per year in the UK or Commonwealth countries was no small ask. It would require significant time away from the life Harry and Meghan had built in California, as well as exposure to the British press and the environment they had left because of its toxicity and the damage it had inflicted on their mental health. Meghan's willingness to return regularly was doubtful at best. She had made clear that she felt unsafe, that the racism and harassment she experienced had been deeply traumatic, and asking her to agree to frequent visits could test their marriage in ways Harry might not risk. The provisions concerning his children were even more sensitive. Harry and Meghan had fiercely protected Archie and Lilibet, raising them largely out of the public eye in California with American values and perspectives. Trustees approved by King Charles, having oversight of funds for their education and upbringing, could feel like an intrusive mechanism of control, and the requirement for the children to spend meaningful time in the UK raised questions about enforcement, interpretation, and the definition of heritage connection. Yet amid these challenges, Harry might also perceive in his grandmother's provision something he had long sought proof that he had not been entirely cut off, that there remained family who valued connection over estrangement. His bond with the Queen had remained special even through the worst conflicts. She had been a source of stability and unconditional love that other family members had not offered. Learning that she had spent her final months trying to engineer a path back to the family might pierce the defensive armor he had built over years of public battle and private grievance. Meghan's perspective would inevitably influence his response. She had been the catalyst that empowered him to leave royal life, shaped by her own negative experiences, and determined to maintain a sense of safety and autonomy for their family while navigating the complex demands of legacy, loyalty, and reconciliation. In California, Harry and Meghan had built a life that offered opportunities, connections, and stability that would be disrupted by regular returns to the UK, and Meghan's perspective would weigh heavily in any decision. At the same time, Harry faced the moral and emotional question of what he owed his children. Could he, in good conscience, cut Archie and Lilibet off completely from their British heritage, from their royal family, from the possibility of knowing their grandfather, uncle, or cousins? The Queen's provision seemed designed to prevent that, to ensure that even if adult relationships remained fractured, the children would retain the chance to forge their own connections. It was clear that Harry could not remain unaffected by his grandmother's final message. Knowing she had spent her last months thinking of him, worrying about his future, and attempting to build a bridge that might outlast her death would force him to grapple with complex emotions: love, guilt, anger, gratitude, suspicion, and hope, all competing as he considered how to respond to this unexpected posthumous gift. Charles's advisors recommended a hybrid approach. A formal legal notification would inform Harry of the inheritance, its conditions, and the process for claiming it, while a brief, measured personal letter from Charles would acknowledge the discovery of his mother's provision and signal his intention to honor her wishes, creating space for dialogue without pleading or demanding. The legal documents would specify a 90-day period for Harry to accept or reject the terms. Acceptance would trigger practical steps: appointing trustees, establishing frameworks to monitor compliance with conditions, and creating mechanisms for the children's funds requiring communication with the palace that had been minimal in recent years. Rejection would revert the funds to the general estate, but the public implications would be considerable, casting Harry as either principled or ungrateful in the media narrative. Most likely, however, the path forward might involve negotiation, with Harry's legal team seeking modifications to the conditions and the palace carefully navigating the balance between legal requirements, familial reconciliation, and public perception. Harry might challenge the conditions, arguing they were too restrictive or impractical, perhaps reducing the 90 days per year to 60, spreading them across multiple years, or modifying the trustee arrangements for his children's funds to allow him and Meghan more control. The Queen had been meticulous in her drafting, but even the most precise legal language leaves room for interpretation and discussion. For King Charles, these negotiations would be a test of both judgment and heart. How much to bend to accommodate his son's concerns versus how much to honor the letter of his mother's wishes. Finding the right balance would require understanding Harry, discerning what might genuinely bring him back versus what could push him further away. Charles's decades of diplomatic experience had never been tested in circumstances so personal or so painful. The potential impact on other royals, particularly William's children George, Charlotte, and Louis, added another layer of complexity. Could they develop relationships with their uncle if Harry returned regularly? Would William permit it, or continue to maintain distance? The Queen's vision seemed to include mending these generational rifts, but implementation depended on cooperation from family members who did not all share her conciliatory instincts. A more likely scenario might be partial and messy. Harry could accept the inheritance, but meet only the technical requirements, maintaining emotional distance while spending the required time in the UK or Commonwealth, resulting in a functional but cool relationship. Worst case, the inheritance could become a new flashpoint. Harry might comply formally while publicly criticizing the conditions, transforming his grandmother's gift into a symbol of control and fueling media scrutiny, portraying Charles as either weak or cruel. The path forward was unclear, fraught with emotional landmines and practical obstacles, Yet it was a path nonetheless a framework for potential reconciliation, drawn by a grandmother's hand. For the first time in years, the family had a map towards something resembling connection. The hidden clause had emerged from secrecy into reality, and King Charles now held both a burden and an opportunity, a final test and a gift from his mother. What he and Harry chose to do would shape not only their relationship, but the future of the monarchy itself. The clock was ticking, and across the distance from London to California, the family's fate hung in the balance, suspended between past pain and the uncertain possibilities of what might come.